Welcome to an Odyssey in Mixology. In this video, I'm going to review Munyon's Paw Paw liqueur and Rockey's liqueur, as well as make some simple cocktails with each. Both of these are bottles that I came across at a tequila festival of all places, but regardless, they're really unique liqueurs with some interesting history behind them. Enjoy! So last month was the Sunset Tequila Mezcal Festival in Boca Raton, Florida. Now, whilst tickets are a bit pricey, it's a cool event that puts 50 or so spirit producers in one place, along with food trucks, live music, and as many spirit samples and cocktails as you can drink. Now, realistically, 60% of the booths are for tequila, 10% are for mezcal, and 30% are for everything else. The expense of my liver, I managed to go to pretty much every booth and try at least one of their offered spirits. For the mezcal booths, I just had to do the whole flight. Now, of all the brands I tried and talked to, the booths for Sidecar Mezcal, Vago Mezcal, Weber Ranch Vodka, Munyon's Paw Paw liqueur, and Rockey's liqueur stood out as the highlights of the day. For this video, I'm going to focus on the last two liqueurs because I'm going to do a whole segment on mezcal and agave spirits later on. So with that being said, what are these two liqueurs, and what makes them special? Well, the Munyon's Paw Paw liqueur is a full-flavored, bitter aperitif produced in South Florida. You could liken it to a combination of tropical triple sec and Suze that really only scratches the surface of its deeper complexity and history. The Rockey's liqueur is a low-sugar, low-proof liqueur produced in New York. It's primarily comprised of lighter fruits, herbal teas, and citrus. It has some unique characteristics though because it draws quite a bit of inspiration from milk punches. Now these two bottles could not be more different, but they're going to start showing up in more of the new drinks I create. There's going to be upcoming segments revolving around using bitterness in tea and cocktails, so whilst I could take a couple minutes of those videos to introduce these, I think they deserve a bit more screen time. Now with that being said, I'm going to go into a bit of the history of each, taste them independently, and then make a couple of the simple cocktails that the producers recommend. That'll give me a good idea of how to use these so I can then make some of the more complex drinks that I have planned. Let's start with the Munyon's Paw Paw liqueur. A version of this liqueur was first created in 1903 as the flagship elixir of Dr. James Munyon's homeopathic remedy company. This elixir was said to cure everything from kidney, liver, and blood problems to general sleepiness. Dr. Munyon might have overstated the effects just a tad, but this was also the guy who created a fountain of youth for paying customers by pumping sulfuric water from a nearby harbor into a pool. Whilst his company was registered in Philadelphia, the tropical ingredients made it a popular beverage in one of his other business ventures, a health-themed beachside hotel called the Hygeia. It was located on his own private island in the inlet between Jupiter and West Palm Beach, Florida. The island was home to many botanicals and different fruit trees, including papayas, which are sometimes referred to as Paw Paws, hence the elixir's name. Now, it's no surprise that his elixir incorporated many of these ingredients, and blending them all together was indeed an impressive feat. The hotel burned down in 1917, and Dr. Munyon died a year later. Now, the island still exists today, but it was used as a dumping ground for 1930s dredging boats, so there's really nothing left of its former glory. Dr. Munyon and his company faded to history until a 2021 book on his life was released. It rekindled the interest in his eccentric story. A year later, Munyon's Paw Paw liqueur was re-released in the original bottle style and using many of the same ingredients to replicate the taste of the original. What I have in front of me is a homage to a really interesting piece of history, and ultimately to a man whose medical knowledge bordered on wishful thinking, but his expertise on creating interesting and unique flavors was probably second to none. Unlike the original elixir, today's Munyon's Paw Paw liqueur is no longer shrouded in mystery. The brand makes the ingredients visible through a cool flap on the back label, and when talking to them at the festival, they didn't claim this would make me grow a foot taller or make me a bit smarter. Instead, they were passionate about the product, and after trying it and hearing their story, I went out and bought a bottle immediately. So on the nose, the Munyon's Paw Paw liqueur smells of grapefruit, a bit of papaya, and gentian root. There's a bit more complexity there, but if I had to pick the three top smells, those are the ones that hit the hardest. It's not overly bright, but it does smell exceedingly natural and not at all syrupy. It's really good. It has kind of a tropical scent to it. If you're unfamiliar with gentian root, then I would equate it to an earthy, bitter flavor with kind of hints of a natural citrus, but definitely not like a lemon or lime citrus. It's different than the bitterness you get from a Campari or an Aperol, However, the grapefruit and fruit citrus in this bottle kind of splits the difference between those and a pure gentian root liqueur like Suze. I'd say above all else though, the aroma here is just interesting. So the taste is very well balanced, but you obviously have to like bitter liqueurs to fully appreciate it. And one step further, you probably have to like gentian root to really enjoy it. The first taste is of light orange, grapefruit, and papaya, but the citrus peel and the gentian root do not mess around. As the flavors turn into bitterness as the primary, the gentian root and the grapefruit peel are kind of competing to see who can outlive each other the longest. It sticks around for a while. Now, gentian root does have a bit of an aftertaste, and I'd say it's a bit of an acquired taste as well. The one here is completely expected. It's just what you have when you have gentian root in a liqueur, but it's not as powerful as the one you'd get from Suze, and that's frankly a good thing because it makes it a little bit more mass appeal on this one. In addition, I really like the aftertaste here because the fruits are adding some interesting compounding flavors as that sip transitions from bright fruit into, kind of full bitterness. Overall, it's really good. It does something a bit new. Now, the orange, grapefruit, papaya, and gentian flavors stand out as the primaries, but I also get a bit more of the passion fruit and anise that I did on the aroma. The hibiscus and ginger are a bit too subtle to pick out by themselves, but as is the case with more complex liqueurs, I probably miss them if they were removed. I also really like the sweetness level. It's a bit lower than what I've come to expect from these kinds of liqueurs, and that, coupled with the lack of artificial coloring, sets this apart from the bright red food-colored ones that are kind of the standards nowadays. Now, with there being so many bitter aperitifs on the market, it seems to have found a bit of a niche without overstepping into the Campari or the Suze's territory in the flavor profiles. As far as cocktails go, I have a few interesting ones in mind, but they'll show up during my segment on bitterness. Instead, I want to quickly make a few of the simple cocktails this brand recommends, just to see how they intend their liqueur to be used. So these are the two cocktails I've chosen, and the recipes are listed on the sides. Over here, I have the Old Fashioned Remedy, which is a riff off of a dark rum Old Fashioned. Over here, I have the Munyon's Cosmo, which is a riff off of a Cosmopolitan. Now, as I mentioned, I'm not really reviewing these drinks to see how good they are. Rather, I care more about how the liqueur interacts with different ingredients, and ultimately, can this liqueur elevate the classic cocktails? And if it can, then I think it's a pretty safe bet that it works really well with a wide variety of drinks. If it struggles to maintain its uniqueness or just nice flavors in these new riffs, it might struggle with other more difficult recipes and ingredients. So the Munyon's doesn't actually come through there as strong as I would have expected. The bitterness is still there, but what I'm getting more is kind of the citrus and the tropical flavors from the Munyon's. It's still a good rum Old Fashioned, but it doesn't knock my socks off, and I think this can be used in more interesting ways. Now, most of the cocktails on Munyon's website really fell into the oversimplified category, which is fine. I think if you're trying to get your liqueur out for the first time, then you need to create simple cocktails that kind of rely on the classics in order to get people to start, purchasing your liqueur and using it in simple ways, and then it can kind of grow out from there. In this case, I think it could have been used a little bit better, but it's still a good drink. For the Cosmo, that's a bit more interesting. Now, the cranberries are a little bitter, but the addition of the Munyon's Paw Paw, it adds to that bitterness, it adds some complexity. The gentian root and the grapefruit are really working with the cranberry, even though the cranberry is still a bit more potent. Now, I think I can do way better than these as far as utilizing Munyon's to its full potential, but overall, it's easy to mix. I can see this flavor profile going in a wide range of stuff, and the fact that it goes with two of these, very different and still equally good, but in different ways, cocktails, it's a safe bet to say it's going to work in many others as well. Munyon's Paw Paw liqueur succeeds in bringing back an intriguing turn-of-the-century elixir with an even more interesting story behind it. It's unique enough to stand on its own, but it retains enough common flavors that it can likely sub in for other bitter aperitifs fairly easily. The light but complex flavor balances the right amount of bitterness and sweetness to create a genuinely enjoyable liqueur by itself or in cocktails. Bottle is of extremely high quality with crisp glass lines and a good feel, but I do wish the front label was a little more interesting. There's nothing wrong with it, but some embossed detailing and a bit more of a vintage or striking look would better match the quality of the rest of the bottle and the liqueur inside. At $30, the price point is perfect for what you get out of it. That brings me to Rockey's Liqueur. Now, Rockey's isn't a recreation of a 100-year-old mad elixir, but the process it's inspired by actually dates back almost 4 times further. Maybe that's going too far back though. Let's start in 2016. Eamon Rockey was a general manager at New York's Michelin-starred Bethany Restaurant and Cocktail Bar. Making a bar menu to match the fine dining required some serious innovation. Women started incorporating a centuries-old technique called milk punching to produce clarified, silky smooth, and highly flavorful cocktails. The cocktails were hugely successful and helped renew interest in this lesser-known cocktail creation process. Milk punch is thought to have been created by an English poet in the late 1600s, but the process was first recorded in a cookbook from 1711. The first step in creating a classic milk punch is to combine a spirit, a tea, a citrus, and a sugar with whole milk. The citrus curdles the milk fat, which binds with the solids in the mixture. These solids are just larger particulates left over from the original ingredients. They contribute towards color and the cloudiness in the drink. As this curdling happens, the whey proteins from the milk break off at a molecular level. Once strained a few times and sent through a filter, the resulting mixture is clarified, shelf-stable, a flavor rounded out, and most importantly, the texture almost silky smooth. The latter 2 characteristics are directly due to the whey protein that is left in the final filtered liquid. Eamon perfected this process, and over time he saw how many cocktails were improved by the milk punch process. After 4 years of pushing the boundaries in both their culinary and cocktail arts, Bethany closed shop to make way for new opportunities. When Eamon became a free agent, he turned his attention towards creating a subtle liqueur that could work with a huge variety of ingredients. He took inspiration from his successful milk punch cocktails and started combining different flavors, textures, and processes to create something new. Eamon Rockey spent a year finalizing his starting recipe and perfecting this process on a larger scale. 2 years after Bethany closed its doors, he released a specialty milk punch liqueur that utilized apples, pineapples, lemons, different specialty teas, a neutral spirit, all in combination with his new milk punching process. He named it Rockey's, but it is not today's version. A few years ago, he revamped the process to remove the milk punching and give the bottle a bit of a facelift. Today, Rockey's is not a milk punch, but it retains the desirable characteristics of a milk punch, including the low sugar, low proof, and silky texture, along with all of the original flavors. Because of these characteristics, it has the ability to add subtle complexity to a multitude of different ingredients, and it's grown steadily in popularity amongst bartenders in the years since its release. So, on the nose, the Rockey's liqueur has powerful, almost sour lemon and tea notes. The tea side of the smell is more matcha than chai, but it works really well with the citrus. The lemon side is not a bright limoncello smell, rather it's more of a darker lemon peel smell. I've made lemon peel infused tequila before, and surprisingly the citrus note coming off of that kind of reminds me of the citrus note coming off of this one, just minus the tequila. Now, there's no alcohol bite on the nose, and overall it's quite a bit more potent of an aroma than I would have expected given the light ingredients. So the taste is both simple and complex at the same time. And that sounds like a bit of a conflict, but it's definitely not a negative. The first thing I taste is kind of a natural lemon. And then there is a subtle tropical twist from the pineapple. Now those 3 flavors are similar, and kind of with a casual sip, I taste lemon. But after a couple follow-ups, that complexity starts to come through as I'm kind of realizing it's not lemon, it's like lemon, but it's an overall new combination of flavors that I haven't tried before. Now, if you've watched my 3rd video on my spice or ginger segments, then this is also the approach I take to create layers in my new higher complexity cocktails. Similar flavors can build onto each other in interesting ways without muddying the flavors or just tasting like there's too much going on. The tea is a bit of a secondary flavor, but it's balanced and works really well with the citrus. Now, unlike the aroma, I get a bit more of a black tea taste here, even though there's still some green tea flavors in the background. From a ranking standpoint, I'd say that green tea is a bit stronger than the pineapple, but still not as strong as the apple, black tea, and lemon flavors. Overall, this is also one of the least sweet liqueurs I've ever had. There is just enough sweetness to offset the citrus, but it's nowhere near as sweet as, say an elderflower liqueur. It's ever so slightly astringent, and with this using a neutral grain alcohol, there's no spirit flavor to mess around with the fruit and tea flavors. Now, the final part of this liqueur is the texture that's been recreated from the original milk punching process. This is still velvety smooth, and it has maybe 50% the texture of a fresh milk punch cocktail. Frankly, the fact that it's that close to begin with is pretty impressive. It's hard to describe the texture beyond velvety if you've never had a milk punch before, but the best way I can do that is to say that it's not syrupy. This and other actual milk punches are light, but it clings to your tongue just a bit and feels more substantial than a regular liqueur. Now, full disclosure, I've been buying Rockies for about 2 years now, and it's one of only 2 bottles that I actively stockpile, the other being this bottle of Iris right here. I'll pick up as many as I can get if it goes on sale for $20 and under, but if I start to run low, I won't hesitate to pay the slightly higher MSRP. Not only have I come up with and continue to come up with some really interesting cocktails using it, but when I throw parties, I make green tea shots with a 50-50 mix of chilled vodka and Rockies and a small sprinkle of matcha powder on top. They're one of the best simple shots that I've had, and to say they're a crowd pleaser is an understatement. Surprisingly, I've never tried the simple cocktails on Rocky's website though, and they do have some interesting ones. The next thing I'm going to do is try a few of them and see how the brand intends Rockies to be used in their cocktails. Maybe this will give me some cool ideas for my next more complicated ones. Now, similar to Munyon's, I've chosen 2 simple cocktails off of Rocky's website that are kind of their own twist off of classic cocktails, the Sidecar and the Margarita. Now again, similar to the last cocktail review, I care less about the cocktails themselves and more about how Rockies is used in the ingredient list. If Rockies can go in and not only make a really good drink, but also elevate a classic cocktail that I'm already familiar with, then not only is it a success, but it probably works really well with a lot of different ingredients and cocktails too. So, starting with the Sidecar. So that has an interesting taste of almost enhancing every aspect of the Rockies. Now, this is disproportionately Rockies, so it makes sense that Rockies is the main flavor, but the inclusion of the brandy and the lemon and the orange liqueur really kind of elevates every flavor in the Rockies. I would say this is less of a Sidecar, and it's more of a highlight of Rockies itself. It does fall on the acidic side. The texture of Rockies is there subtly. It still has the same very slight astringent flavor of the liqueur itself. The lemon flavors from the Rockies is elevated by the fresh lemon juice, and the orange works really well here. So that's a really good and fairly straightforward drink. Margarita. It tastes cleaner, honestly. Obviously, there's no triple sec or orange liqueur or orange juice in these. The Rockies is taking place of all of that, so it does what it's supposed to do. It's a simplified margarita. You lose the orange, but you gain a bit of lemon and you gain a bit of the black and green teas. And that's really cool, and it's a good way to utilize Rockies in a very approachable way. This is kind of a middle ground between a regular margarita and something a bit more exotic. That being said, it's honestly a bit too sour. I'd probably go about 1/4 ounce to 1/2 ounce of simple syrup in that, and I think that would balance out a bit better. So again, the Sidecar is using Rockies to highlight Rockies, whereas the Margarita is using Rockies to add just a little bit of extra complexity and depth to it, but the strong flavors from the tequila and the lime kind of overshadow it just a little bit. That doesn't make it any less interesting. It kind of just reaffirms that Rockies works well with just about everything, but it works really well if you put some thought behind how you use it. Overall, Rockies is a deceptively complex liqueur that is wonderful by itself and really interesting in cocktails. Whilst not a true milk punch, it retains the characteristics and makes it unique amongst mass-produced liqueurs. It has a smooth flavor and texture, whilst the base recipe lets the similar fruits and different teas shine. The low sugar and low proof from a neutral alcohol lets it work well with just about every type of spirit and ingredient I've tried. In cocktails, Rockies works best if used in high volumes so that you can take full advantage of the subtle complexity. If used in low volumes, the liqueur can get easily steamrolled because the prominent lemon blends into a cocktail's default citrus. At that point, the teas just aren't strong enough to get out in front of the more powerful ingredients. When balanced correctly, Rockey's does an excellent job of elevating cocktails, and in some cases, it can even take center stage. The newest facelifted bottle with the different fonts, sizes, and spacing creates an almost whimsical look, and I really like the way it looks on a bar. Pricing for this bottle varies, but for an average of $25, I think this is a great liqueur with some fun characteristics. That's it for my video on Munyon's Paw Paw liqueur and Rockey's Botanical liqueur. Both of these are great additions to my bar, and if you have a chance to pick up these less common bottles, I highly suggest you do so. In my next video, I'm going to be taking two of Empirical's latest spirits and trying to make a Doritos Locos Taco cocktail that's actually good and not just some clickbaity trope. If you enjoyed this video, then please subscribe, but above all else, thank you so much for watching. Cheers!